Good afternoon. Can I? Yeah? Ladies and gentlemen, the purpose of my presentation today is to look a bit beyond the hype of this exciting topic, blockchain, and to outline what this foundational innovation that will change the way we live and work actually means, as I would say maybe an intro or a brief wrap-up or intro to the panel we are going to have. To start with, I actually want to show you a trailer of a documentary, of the Cryptopia documentary. That is a film which I actually co-produced with my friend Thorsten Hoffmann, an Australian-based filmmaker, and we started in 2018 to produce it with a team or several teams across the globe, and interviewed quite a few of the bright minds and big egos in that space to find out what is actually behind that. So this is actually the second award-winning film of Thorsten after his initial film, Bitcoin, the End of Money. Now a look into the applications of the field. Does that work? How can I start this? Pun? Again? Yeah.
Right, finally, we have Thorsten Hoffmann, who's the producer of the Cryptopia film.
Thanks, Peter. 5 years ago, I made a film about the history of money, banking, and Bitcoin. Buckle up, we said, it's gonna be a bumpy ride. And now, some of the big brains and big egos who championed cryptocurrency claim they are building a crypto utopia.
Magical things will happen.
With something called blockchain technology, and it just might change your life.
And they really could compete with, if not even take down, the Facebooks and the Googles and the Amazons.
My name is Thorsten Hoffmann, and I'm going to put some of these claims to the test.
Some critics say you kind of hurt the community. What's your response to that? This innovation has enabled a lot of criminals and scammers.
But basically, looking at it now, you lie to us. Forget all the hype. We'll explore the true potential of this new invention. See who is already using it.
Making it really easy and simple for people to own a piece of a solar farm or a wind farm.
And go deep into a secret bunker that holds billions in Bitcoin.
And we cannot talk too much about it because it's pretty secret what is down there.
If Bitcoin succeeds, it will be at least $1 million per coin.
We'll learn lessons from the past and meet those building the future. But there are those who want to kill it.
Join with me in introducing a bill to outlaw cryptocurrency so that we nip this in the bud.
Control it.
Next year, people are going to start seeing that we have hundreds of patents and everything changes.
Or change the world with it. Welcome to Ground Zero in the battle for the future of the Internet. Web 3.0.
They wanted a science fiction dream. What they actually did was build forthcoming disaster.
A lot of people were not willing to learn and were not willing to admit they were wrong.
They're idiots.
Why is this fraud allowed to sneak in this car?
Stop telling me that I have no clues. That's just bullshit.
If you don't support free speech, you don't support Bitcoin. You're an enemy of Bitcoin.
This is bigger than the internet, the Iron Age, the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution. This affects the entire world.
Yes. So with this, you probably understand why, to me, when I'm asked what is blockchain, I give a rather non-technical answer, which is blockchain is a foundational innovation at the intersection of technology, economy, and sociology. We could go obviously into the databases and these topics, but to me that's about it. And I would like to explore a little bit my take on what's actually new under the sun. Yeah? And the actual innovation that came to life with the Bitcoin blockchain in 2009 was that a unique digital bearer token was created on top of a distributed database, which is automatically synchronized by a so-called consensus mechanism. And if you think about that, that's pretty amazing, because so far in the Internet of Information, we could transfer only copies of files. A copy of a text document, a copy of a photo, a copy of a music or film file. Now you can actually transfer the actual digital element without a middleman, a so-called middleman between two parties. In the case of money, we are talking about a bank. Yeah? Now, what are the implications? First of all, to do that, the person, Satoshi Nakamoto, or group of persons who brought this innovation to us, solved the so-called double spend problem, which means that they had to solve a mathematical problem that I cannot spend the money that I own or the file twice without somebody manually basically checking that, or a third person checking that. This has been solved. And second, they were able to introduce a so-called single source of truth provided by a tamper-resistant, time-stamped, and auditable documentation of data records. So a distributed database which is cryptographically secured, automatically secured by a so-called consensus mechanism. Now, the key question is, what are actually then the generic use cases? Why should I actually care? And I personally distinguish 3 of those use cases. First, peer-to-peer transfer of assets. We talked about that briefly on the internet. So we are not only talking about a cash, a currency, money that we can transfer here. We can transfer any intangible asset, like, for instance, intellectual property right, like a photo, like any file you can imagine. But we can also transfer physical assets, or at least the ownership rights on physical assets, like, for instance, real estate. If we manage to tie a digital representation, a token, to the actual real ownership right, for instance, to that building, to this building here we are in. Yeah? And think about it. What does that mean? If you want to transfer the ownership of this building from one person to the other, today you are actually obliged to go through a fairly complex process, and this involves third parties like notaries, etc. All this is more or less transferred to software. All these processes. And this brings me to the second generic use case group, which is that we can now replace expensive manual trust provisioning, verification, synchronization services, which are usually performed by third parties manually or semi-automatically to software. And that is really a very, very powerful property. And third, and probably the most interesting use case group we can see now emerging, is the so-called token as an incentive mechanism. And tokens are basically mechanisms and tools to make people do things. If you think about in general, a token can mean, can give you access to, for instance, a casino. It can give you access to use certain services. For instance, the euro gives us access to do transactions in the European economy. The US dollar gives us access to the US economy to do transactions there. Now, if we go a little bit deeper or further to the next level, we have a second stage of this technology, which was fairly revolutionary, and this is the introduction of Ethereum, which is a so-called smart contract platform in 2015. And for the first time with Ethereum, it was possible to automatically execute code or programs based on events that are verified by a so-called consensus algorithm. This led to publications like here in The Economist, The Trust Machine, and further things. I don't want to go into details. We had also the so-called ICO hype, initial coin offering hype, which disappeared. We will hear about that a little later. I want to draw your attention now to the actual technology stack behind that for a brief look. And what you can see here on these layers from the infrastructure up to the application layer is that there are many topics that are fairly complex and involve a lot of stakeholders. There are also quite a few challenges that we face here. Among them, user experience, among them security at interfaces, interoperability of different protocols. Yeah? And there are many initiatives underway which deliver actually quite promising results to solve those key challenges. Now, if we go a bit up again and look at the big picture, what actually happened is that we had from 2009 the introduction of Bitcoin as the first real cryptocurrency. And this, by the way, has a history of about 40 years or so in cryptography and distributed databases. It didn't come out of nowhere. Yeah? And what we see here currently in 2020 as hot topics and key trends are, for instance, the narrative that Bitcoin is established as a so-called digital gold, as an alternative asset to gold, in the context of central banks printing more and more money because the total sum of all Bitcoin is limited to 21 million. And it's fairly easy to transfer it and to handle it compared to gold, where you need a bunker to secure it, for instance. Yeah? And the second key topic in the currency field are central bank digital currencies. So what we see is that fairly all central banks around the globe currently are in a process to transfer their currencies on a blockchain infrastructure. But I remind you, there's a clear difference between the permissionless Bitcoin currency and those centrally controlled currencies, because they still will manipulate, let's say, the properties of those currencies, just as we have that today with the euro or the dollar. Now, what I see there in general, or what we can see there, is that crypto is on the rise. Currently, we have a total market value of Bitcoin of about 200 billion US dollars versus the total value of gold around the world. That's about 10,000 billion US dollars. That's only a fraction of the total assets around the globe. That's about 500 trillion US dollars we see. And I'm pretty sure that we will see a further rise in terms of market capitalization here. But the second key area and stream of innovation is around blockchain-based infrastructure solutions for private and public organizations. That's the use cases in governments, in manufacturing, in healthcare, and so on. And a plethora of those emerged at the intersection of horizontal innovations like identity, like data marketplaces, like data records, and so on, and those industry verticals. And their main purpose today is actually that people are looking into streamlining existing organizations, existing operations, and save money. In the future, we will much more see so-called tokenized organizations and ecosystems, and in a minute I will give you an example. So here we will see a lot of cost savings in financial services, for instance, alone. It's about $500 billion per year that can be saved through the introduction of blockchain-based infrastructure. In the future, we will see new products and services operating and business models that actually will disrupt the existing ones, and that's fairly more interesting, I would say. And the last point here is that we are also seeing so-called decentralized applications on the rise for end users within enterprises as well as for consumers out there. That's fairly early. The first killer applications we have seen in 2017-18 with the so-called initial coin offerings, where startups raised money through the issuance of tokens in exchange for usually US dollars or euro and Bitcoin. Yeah. But right now we are seeing the emergence of a fairly regulated so-called security token market. So we will see basically that all financial instruments we know currently, so bonds, shares, and so on, are moved onto a blockchain infrastructure. So the other thing we will see is that real assets like real estate, like art, and so on, are tokenized, i.e. they are split into small pieces, and more or less everybody out there could buy one of these pieces and a share of it more easily than today. And the third hot topic this year is certainly the so-called decentralized finance. That is that stock exchanges and market makers out there are basically replaced by these software solutions. Now, I want to draw your attention to a fairly interesting B2B2C use case in professional sports here. Why is that? Yeah, because we have been talking a lot about supply chain management and topics around healthcare and so on. And in recent years, there's a lot of work going on here, but it will take a long time until this is established. Here, we have a highly emotional field with mainly two stakeholder groups, the fans out there and the professional sports clubs and athletes. Now, what are the challenges of fans? They care about questions like, how can I be close to my, to my club and to my idols? How can I make my voice heard? I think I need a, exactly. I think I need water here. Thanks. Yeah. And how can I best support my club or athlete? People are buying, for instance, bonds from their club to support them. And second, we have the professional sports clubs or the athletes, and for them, the question is, how do they interact with their fan base? Currently, they do that through social media like Instagram and others, and they largely control the features and the pricing of how they do it. And the clubs are looking for ways how to directly interact with their fan base and to own the data and also have a better control about the features they are using, and also to monetize this fan engagement, apparently, and in the future probably also to raise funds for running this whole operation. Now, I, together with a few colleagues, also co-founded a company around that called Liquiditeam, tokenizing professional sports with innovative solutions for fan engagement and funding. This is all about providing a tokenized, mobile-first, and also customizable fan ecosystem for professional sports clubs who then have a toolkit to build an own digital ecosystem to establish new business models, and also for their fans, which then have a new breed of interactive and social platform where loyal fans can become co-creators of this fan experience or their own fan experience. How does it work? Basically, a club will issue tokens and will transfer to their member base or make it available through purchase. That's an option. The fans can use their tokens in this ecosystem and are rewarded for specific activities and actions. Now, it's all about the way how you actually design this token economy, what the outcome will be, and we are currently working with one of the top 15 soccer clubs in the world, with Borussia Dortmund, in figuring out a superior fan ecosystem in that space. In half a year, or in 2-3 months actually, we will launch this product, and I'm pretty keen to find out what the reaction here will be. Now, what are the key elements of the Liquiditeam approach? It's basically tokenomics. So we build a healthy fan ecosystem with an intelligent token economic approach here. Second, it's about gamification, where we activate global fan communities via gamification. So imagine there are about, in this club, for instance, around 200 million fans, and 50 million of them are based in China. Yeah? They can't go to the games. Still, they want to interact with their idols. Yeah? They want proximity. In the US, same thing, millions of fans, and they can't actually participate in decisions and so on. This brings me to the third point. So we enable fans to become co-creators in their own fan experience through participation mechanism, and we also enable the value-added interactions between the ecosystem participants, and this includes also companies, for instance, which usually fund stadiums, which fund the operations and so on. So this gives you let's say an impression about a fairly interesting use case, which is a bit different from what we discussed maybe in the last years. But with all this, I want to clearly make a point that this is not about technology here. All new products and services that are developed here need to solve a real-world problem better, faster, cheaper. This is what it's all about. And currently in the ecosystem, we are maybe at this point when you look at the automotive industry. Yeah? This was the Daimler Motorwagen, I think in around 1900 or so, or 1800 something, 95. Yeah? But the good news is that right now the solutions with real impact to transform how we live and work are built. And to close this, I want to make one key point. I am really convinced that the real disruptive potential of blockchain will be realized by companies which manage to establish a token economy. Thank you very much.